Welcome to the Subconscious Mind Mastery Podcast. I know you guys love it when we have Fred Dodson on, and Fred is back. We've completed and released a new audiobook. It's called Essays on Creating Reality, Book 7. 7 of these have happened over the years already, and we are going to talk to Fred about a couple of the chapters in the book. But ironically, the day that we connected was the day that Hurricane Ian traveled right across the state of Florida, where Fred is now residing. So the first part of this conversation, we talk about that experience, then some commentary on a couple of chapters with some excerpts toward the end. These essays books, I love narrating them because they just provide such a eclectic set of topics. And with Fred, whenever he writes something, you always learn. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Fred Dodson. Fred, welcome back to the podcast.
It's good to be here. Hello to all listeners.
I know as we are recording this, you just slept through a little bit of a storm overnight, as I understand.
I had a Hurricane Ian coming in my direction, according to Google Maps. And when I zoomed in on Google Maps, it was so weird. The pathway went directly over my house. What I did is I put on earplugs and forgot about the whole thing because it was pretty loud. I just put on earplugs and went to sleep. I thought, I don't want to know anything about this. Just said a prayer and went to sleep. I said, be still, storm. And when I woke up, it turned out there was no more hurricane. It had turned into a so-called tropical storm, and it had never gone over my house. It went a whole nother direction. So that was great. You wake up and the whole thing is gone. I mean, it's still really windy here right now, but it's essentially gone. And all the stuff I was warned about in the news yesterday, flooding and whatnot, has not happened. So I'm happy, but my good thoughts go out to the people of the coast, the west coast of Florida, which got hit pretty bad.
Is there a lesson in there about not paying so much attention to everything you hear?
That's exactly my point. Just put on earplugs and ignore it. Because the Google Maps image had it directly coming toward our house, and my wife was concerned about that. She was up all night, and I said to her, don't wake me up, don't bother me, I just want to sleep. It's so beautiful. You don't worry, and then you wake up and all is well. But that's exactly the point. Highly recommended. I highly recommend non-worry, as you know, as everybody knows.
Yeah, well, I've seen you do it, and this is yet another example of simply following your own reality. And I guess you didn't have any prompts or impulses to go running to the store and fill up baskets and baskets of food and water, and you went to sleep and everything is fine. And now we are, maybe, I don't know, 6 or 8 hours after the thing crossed over the top of you, and you have power and you have internet, and here we are talking.
I never lost power, never lost internet. The storm is now out of country. It's out in the Atlantic Ocean.
And, you know, we could go into a whole different topic on that piece of it, because there are millions of people in Florida right now as we're recording this without electricity. And yet you're not. And, you know, and that's what I wanted to camp on that for a minute, because there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. There are a lot of hurricanes around us all over the place right now, locally, nationally, globally.
I believe it's not a coincidence, of course. I'm not a coincidence believer. I believe that if I get struck, there's a reason for that. I know in our society today, we don't believe that. We don't teach that at school. We don't teach that in the media, but it's what I believe. I believe if something happens to me, it's not a coincidence. I'm looking out of the window right now as I say this, and there's a gigantic tree branch flying into a neighbor's car, damaging the car as I speak, right? Because it's very windy out there still. And I know it's not going to happen to my car. And that really sounds, it can sound cruel, but it's just the way I see it. I mean, it's like everybody around me getting the flu and me not getting it. And it almost sounds like bragging or something. I don't mean it to be bragging. I mean it to teach people that things are not a coincidence. They are governed by universal laws. They are governed by energy. They are governed by meaning, by purpose. This whole idea that you can randomly contract a serious illness or randomly have a horrible accident or randomly this, I just don't buy into it, really. I have a hard time believing that because my experience tells me the opposite. I kept hearing before this hurricane came in, I kept hearing there's nothing you can do about it. Weather people, meteorologists, there's nothing you can do about it. And I don't like that. I don't like the messaging. There's nothing you can do about it. So it's just controversial for sure, but if I'm going to teach reality creation, I'm going to teach reality creation, which is you can do something about it. The ancients all knew how to pray upon weather, how to send intention upon weather, how to the Native Americans, the indigenous people of various places, they knew how to treat the weather, pray on the weather, divert the weather, talk to the weather, command the weather. Am I to assume that all of these pre-modern cultures are stupid and primitive and wrong, and that my own talking to weather is wrong? I told the weather to be still as I put in earplugs and went to sleep. And it was fairly still in my neighborhood. My wife was up at 3 a.m. She couldn't sleep, and she saw something paranormal in our garden. She saw purple lights flashing there. She didn't know what it was. She wasn't scared. She was just surprised. She thought it might be some type of electricity or lightning or whatever, but it all went purple. And I said to her, "Oh, that's just the response to my prayer. We're just cleaning up the field so that we stay safe, in a calm manner." I think a calm manner, even if I were wrong, a calm manner is more helpful than panic.
I've thought about this a lot. When disaster or something bad happens to a collective, to a larger group of people, and we escape it, I've thought of 3 ways or 3 areas that we might, and you, I'm sure, have other thoughts on this, that we want almost to participate in the hurricane so that we can connect with our neighbors, so we can connect with other people who live in Florida. So we fit in. We're part of the group. We're not separate. We're not isolated. That's one. Here's another. Then I'm going to let you comment on all these. The other is that we don't want to be better than others. Well, if I don't have any problems, if my car is fine, my yard is fine, there's nothing in my pool, and my neighbor has a tree sticking out his driver's side window, then I must be better than my neighbor, and I don't want to be better than my neighbor. And then the other one is that we subconsciously or deeply feel that we simply are not good enough or worthy enough to have not that many problems.
This is when the interviewer is more brilliant than the person interviewed. That was brilliant, Thomas. The situation when the interviewer is smarter than the one interviewed.
Look at who I've learned from for 10 years.
That was brilliant. There's nothing for me to add. This is very important. It's a sense of guilt over being problem free. I've encountered this many times in my life, that people feel awkward when I say I don't have any problems. It's like I separate myself from the collective. I sit in groups and I'm like, no problems, no ill health, nope, none of that. And suddenly they might have been talking about problems or ill health or something. I am the odd man out. And I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have said that, Or if I say, no, I haven't had problems in 20 years. Uh-oh. And you can tell it kind of weighs on the atmosphere, even just stating the truth, and that a good life is possible. So people do want to belong to a collective. And in order to belong to the collective, to the hive mind, you got to have some problems. I mean, I'm looking out here right now. It is wild. Still, it is very, very wild out there. But I see beauty. And it's controversial to even say that because all the media stations are talking disaster, dangerous. This is as bad as it gets. I heard storm of the century. That's what they keep saying. And then I say, well, I see beauty out there. Actually, it was so soothing to hear that wind and rain. I had my earplugs on, but what I did hear was still soothing to me. I fell asleep on this disaster, on this danger, knowing I'm safe and all is well. Because that's the programming I'm used to. That's the way I programmed myself my whole life. The more I experience, the more I'm getting sick and tired of the news. I see other people listening to it, or I go to the supermarket and I see it, but it's just so tiring, the constant hyping up. They hype things up like they get it juice out of fear. Like they want to make it much worse than it is. Yes, it's bad. Yes, the West Coast of this state that I'm in has been hit hard. Yes, that's true. And my thoughts go out to them. I've already sent out some good words to them. And I do believe in the power of that. But the way things are hyped up, like people want to be victims and people are excited by it. But there's also other people who went jet skiing out in the hurricane. That's the other extreme. I'm certainly not that extreme. That's stupid. But there's all kinds of people. And it's like the type who goes jet skiing, they're at least admitting that they're getting juice off of the fear, right? While the others, they're playing victim. And the tone of the media is so bad, it needs to change. It makes you wonder who on earth is running these media stations. I mean, it's all whiny and fear. There's no sense of hope or joy or I don't know. You follow what I'm saying?
I used to be in that business. When I was 21 years old and a senior in college, I was anchoring the news at an ABC television station in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Now, this was 1981. It's a whole different game than it is today. But I'm sure you've seen this deal. And see, back then, media companies used to be more locally owned. Generally, there was a wealthy family that owned the television station and maybe a newspaper and possibly a radio station in a given town. Now, the media companies are owned by 5 major corporations, basically. I'm sure you've seen these things online. They're really funny in a way and then pathetically sad in another. It's where they string a bunch of news people, typically anchors, saying exactly the same thing, the same sentence.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen those? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I actually put out a video showing that a couple of years back.
Yeah, they string these things together. And so there is a unified corporate message among the 5 media companies. One of them down there just south of you, Disney, obviously, is one of them, that is a big owner now of ABC and many other entities. So there is a unified message in all of this.
Yeah, that's a whole another issue. But it's what I noticed with this hurricane event, you notice so much, is how they all these experts who seem to know everything that's going to happen, and then it doesn't. It's annoying. The hurricane is going to do this. It's like they're trying to evoke that it's going to do that. It's going to travel here. It's going to do this, and then this. And then it does something entirely different. Everybody's like, it's going to hit Tampa. It's going to hit Tampa. And then it hits Naples. It's good to just switch it off, which is what I did mostly. I got caught up in it for about 1 hour. And then I said, no, I'm not going to go this path. never mind. I'm gonna go to sleep.
Well, and I mean, you're describing by your actions how to do it. But if somebody listening were to ask, well, Fred, tell me how I get out of that trap, because I would be the one that would be watching the news. I would be the one that's up all night. I would be the one panicking and worried about all my possessions. What do you do to get out of that? And then we're going to transition into a chapter in this book to talk about exactly the same thing.
I had to switch it off. I had specifically asked my wife not to share updates with me anymore and not to wake me up. I mean, you ask me, what do you specifically do? It's really simple. I switch off. It's a conscious decision not to be in that reality anymore, that panicky vibe. Oh, and just turn it off, because I'm in a flooding zone. And the prediction was that this place I live is going to flood big time. And I just didn't want to hear about it. We did prepare. We were well prepared, actually. We had sandbags and all set up. But apart from that, I'd done my part. Okay, if the sandbags don't work, too bad. I'll wake up when the water gets to my neck. And then I'll swim out. So what? Big deal.
That's when you ask the universe, could the water at least be 82 degrees?
Yeah, fortunately, it's warm here. People need to know that their word has power, and what they speak has power. Their prayer has power. Their intention has power, which is basically what I've been saying the last 25 years and what I do in every case of emergency. I've been through so many emergencies. I've had a storm like this, worse storms like this in my life. And so what? It's something to deal with, when it comes. The problem is that people deal with it way before it comes. So it starts like 5 days before the hurricane warning, and then they waste their time and energy on it. What could you do in 5 days? In 5 days, you could make so many beautiful improvements in your life. Do you really want to spend the 5 days until the so-called disastrous event occurs, wasting your energy on what's going to occur? You don't know. Nobody knows what's going to occur. So the message here is you don't know. If they predict disaster, you don't know that. And this doesn't only apply to storms. This applies to all kinds of disasters I've heard about in the last years by news organizations, and also by so-called conspiracy theorists, and by even coaches such as myself who predict disaster. And I just unsubscribe from their Twitter timeline or whatever, because I don't want to hear about disaster prediction. In fact, we've been predicting disasters for thousands of years. I remember in the 70s, they kept predicting an ice age. And then in the 90s, they predicted we're all going to sink under the ocean due to global warming. And then they predicted that pandemics such as swine flu and SARS and whatever would wipe out humanity. AIDS would wipe out humanity. And then they predicted that in 1988, the world would end, Armageddon. And then they predicted the end times again. I mean, end times predictions, you got them every couple of years. Then they predicted 2012 we'd be done with. So, humans have a history of failed negative prediction. My message is you don't know what's going to happen.
One more question, then we'll get to this chapter in the book, which is perfect parlay to this. But what's that thin line, or maybe it's not so thin, between avoidance, even ignorance of a particular thing, not knowing of something, versus what you're talking about of creating your own reality bubble and just staying in it? How much should we not be aware, in other words?
We should be aware of what people think is going on, because the collective belief adds to its creation. I actually have a conspiracy theory of my own. I think the media is trying to create certain disasters through constant repetition. So I'm aware of what the crowd believes. And because if I'm going to create my own bubble, I got to know what the bubble is in contrast to. It's in contrast to public belief. Like the public believes in COVID, so I'm going to create my bubble where I don't get it, and I didn't get it. Yay! Not vaccine, still didn't get it. Yay! I'm still waiting. Okay, people were like, "Oh, it's dangerous, not getting vaccines, Fred." I'm still waiting. Bring it on, you know. But I'm in that bubble where I'm not going to get it, and I'm not going to get this, this, and this. I was in a when I lived back in New Zealand. I was in a tsunami, and that was so bad. We had water coming through our ceiling and walls. This Hurricane Ian has nothing on that. That's a benefit. If you've been in really, really bad and you've had a protective bubble in that, then you fear nothing anymore. I think it's valuable to have an experience of utter disaster and being in your bubble where it doesn't affect you, because the more that happens, the more you believe and you trust that this can be done. So there should be awareness. Ignorance is not going to do it. Ignorance is naive. It's denial. Denial doesn't work. So I'm going to be somewhat aware without focusing. There's one thing to be aware, to know what's going on, and it's another thing to totally get into it and focus on it all the time. It's a matter of time invested and energy invested and emotion invested. I can be aware of a thing without investing my emotion.
We have another audio book out, book and audio book. It's called Essays on Creating Reality, Book 7. And chapter 22 is a perfect parlay to this. I'm going to pick one and then you pick one. This is the one that I picked, How to Exit the Matrix. And here, let me just read the first paragraph here to get this started. You said there is an experiment where a glass plate is put into a fish tank, confining the fish to one side of the tank. The plate is left for some time in place. Once it is removed, the fish generally stay on their side of the tank. They act as if the limitation is still there, even though it has been lifted. And the second example you give is gnats in a jar, and you put a lid on the jar, and it keeps them in the jar, and then you take the lid off, and they stay in the jar. Or a picture that you put in the book was great. Here's a horse that has been, through its bridle, has been tied to just a lawn chair, about a 2-pound plastic lawn chair, and that we realize that a lot of these things that we think that we are tethered to are a lot less weighty than we give them credit for. So how do we escape from the matrix?
There's a higher state of consciousness that I've been in once in a while, and in this state, there's no concern whatsoever, no worry whatsoever. In this state, I'll leave my car door open, my house door open, won't even notice it. I'm not saying that I'm doing that now, because I'm not in that state. But there is this state where you are not concerned about what you say. I'm not concerned about what your opinion is of me. My opinion is of you, what you expect of me, what I expect of you. It's a state above wakefulness. So we got sleeping, we got waking, and then there's hyper awake. It's truly a higher state of consciousness. It's outside of the matrix. It is so worryless. Imagine, in a positive way, not caring what others say, what others think, just going by intuition, not having to protect anything or affirm anything or change anything, just being happy to be alive, full of energy, happy to sit with people, be with people, meet people, do projects, do creative work, whatever. That's the state outside of the matrix, Thomas. And sometimes you can ascend to it through meditation, for example, or through grace, or through various exercises, or simply through awareness of that state, or through reading my book, Levels of Energy. You can ascend to that state where you just don't worry about anything. It's not a state of apathy. It's a state of peace. That is certainly outside of the matrix. You know, people care too much. They're too concerned, too worried. Got to protect from this. What's going to happen about this? What should I do about this? Preparing for the worst. And I'm very grateful for my state yesterday, just putting on earplugs so I don't hear all the storm and drama and stuff shaking and whatnot, and just can sleep in peace.
Nice. Very nice. Now, these are short chapters, so we're not going to play long excerpts, but I wanted to just drop in a little bit of a reading from this chapter on how to escape the matrix. You leave the low-frequency matrix by keeping aware of what is outside of the jar, outside of the glass plate, outside of the box, outside of the current context. In life, there are many things you get immersed into, and that's great. But often you get so very into something, you forget anything outside of it. Having achieved that, you soon find yourself in a bigger box. The gnat that escapes the jar is then in a room. There is no reason to then spend the rest of your life in the bigger box, congratulating yourself on having left the jar. You keep expanding. When you go beyond the house, you're in a bigger context called the neighborhood, then the town, then bigger and bigger, until you stretch beyond the cosmos itself. It may feel scary to go beyond, but soon you familiarize yourself with the surroundings. Once you are completely comfortable, it's time to expand awareness again. But isn't it dangerous to keep going into the unknown? Aren't I much safer in the confines of my home than wandering around in the wilderness at night? Yes, but if you think that way, you will never grow. A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. I'm not advising that you should always be going into the unknown, but that there are phases of rest and comfort, and there are phases of expansion. Life wasn't meant to be static. The matrix is about lulling you into a sense of settling for less, as in, there isn't any more out there, this is it, so enjoy it. Flow is finding the balance with being content with things as they are, but still expanding to include more. It's nice inside the jar, but let's go check what's beyond it. We can always return to the jar if we really miss it. Essays on Creating Reality, Book 7 has 40 different essays that you've written in 2022. Of the topics that you're familiar with in the book, which one would you like to take on next?
I'd say a fun topic is singing in an invented language.
I love that chapter. I'm glad that you didn't have the narrator sing. That would have been a good thing. All right, this is chapter 25 in the book, and the title is called I Sing in an Invented Language. The effects have been interesting. Singing in an invented language quickly shuts off the thinking mind and the conceptual world. Intuition and perception deepen. New feelings and unfamiliar thoughts arise because of the shift in frequency. Sometimes the top of my head feels like it's opening up. Other times my chest gets warm. If I give this a name, I would call it creative singing. I realize a lot of people would be embarrassed to do this. They don't like the sound of their voice. They could be even more embarrassed to use an unknown language. But to me, all of this points to a person not allowing the expression of their innermost, authentic self. Creative singing then becomes a path to your true self. It's a lot of fun. You should give it a try. In closing, here is a ranking from low to high in terms of experiencing music. Listening to random music on the radio would be the lowest. Consciously choosing your music would be a level above. Doing your own singing and chanting of favorite songs would be higher. And the highest is singing songs created by you in a language invented by you. So how did this come about?
It happened a few years ago when I was in my car. I'd usually have silence in the car. I didn't like radio, never liked radio, never liked the quality of music, never liked the messaging. But eventually I just started singing in my car, singing songs I knew. And that over time, that progressed into singing more spiritually, more as an affirmation and singing words that I'd like to manifest and experience in my body, mind, being, and world. And then over time, I progressed even more. All of this is always in my car, by the way. I usually don't do it at home, but it's a good thing to do on long drives. It progressed into making up my own language and singing in an unknown language, making my language up as I go. What this did is it shut off the mind completely. The kind of affirming songs that I did, prayer-like songs, they shut off the mind pretty well, but this went even one step further, similar to speaking in tongues, I think, except speaking in tongues is supposed to be inspired. And what I was doing was kind of not really inspired. It's more self-created. I wasn't channeling anything. It was me, right? It was me making up the language as opposed to channeling or speaking in tongues. I have an example of this in a video on my website in the gold members section if somebody wants to hear me sing. I don't really want to do it now. It's not the mood for it. Usually I have to get into a certain space before I do it, or I want to get into a certain space. So that's what it is in a nutshell.
What are you feeling when this comes on?
Well, it doesn't really come on, because if it were to come on, it would be channeling or speaking in tongues. It's something I decide to do so to stop the mind. And in the beginning, I don't feel much. But as I get into it and modulate my voice into different languages and sounds, I actually feel that I'm speaking a real language that exists somewhere in some realm. And the reason I feel that is because the language differs from day to day. Sometimes I'm picking up this kind of language, sometimes that kind of language. I might even be picking up languages from planet Earth. I feel, makes me feel very calm and light. Some languages are a bit darker, some are a bit lighter. Actually, speaking in a different language allows you to feel differently because every language has a certain mentality connected to it.
Does this make you feel lighter? Do you feel higher energy when you're doing this?
Yes. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it.
And you know, they say that what you sing, you can create through song. You know, you could sing something about the new car that is coming to me now, and you could sing about your new car. You could sing about the new partner who is getting ready to waltz right into my life. But by singing high energy vibration songs that uplift you, you can walk things right into your life. So when you're singing in an unknown language, I'll bet you're connecting with all kinds of subconscious, juicy stuff.
You're connecting with stuff you don't even know what you're manifesting. That's right. That's the fun of it. So I do sing into manifestation things in the language I know, and I like the practice, always loved it. In my 20s, I always sang that I'm rich beyond my wildest dreams. But singing in an invented language allows you to connect to stuff that is so unknown and surprising. There's no other way I can say it. Surprising vibes. And I feel the surprising vibes. By the time I arrive in my car, at my destination, get out of the car, you know, there might be a tingle on the top of my head or in my forehead. And I know I'm in a different space, different vibe.
When you did this for the very first time, how did you go into the unknown language, the invented language?
How did I go into it? I just, I was, do you know overtone chanting?
Not familiar with it.
It's like, was doing that again in the car. Had my window rolled down and forgotten that it was rolled down, came to a red light and somebody was looking over. So what's going on here?
Just narrating an audiobook.
And while I was doing that, overtone chanting creates certain frequencies and overtones that are not deliberately made. They come by themselves. While I was doing that, you might want to look it up, overtone chanting. It's an awesome topic, awesome thing to learn. While I was doing that, I thought, okay, I'm just going to invent sounds here. And then I recalled something I'd read about glossolalia, I think is the name. Not sure, glossolalia, which is people speaking in languages they don't know. But in their case, it's like they get possessed or something, and they don't do it consciously. And I thought, what if I were to do that consciously? Just invent a language. And then I just started singing. It just came. I just started inventing and making up words in a singing voice. And at first it was like, it sounded more like mantra chanting. And later on, it went more into melody singing and became more gentle. How often do I do it? Maybe these days, maybe once or twice a month while driving in the car, especially on long rides. You got a long ride coming and you're on a highway, you just, it's a great thing to do on the highway.
Man, I'm excited. I have about a 15-minute drive after we get finished here, and I'm going to do it even on that. It's not a long one, but it'll be a Kickstarter for sure. This will be fun.
Sometimes I actually take words from road signs, and that'll be, I scramble up the letters, and that'll be the next word I sing.
That would be cool, is you could, like on a little stretch of highway where there are more, or I say more inner city kind of driving, where you have a lot of exposure to signs, you could sing and never stop, right? By just scrambling road sign words.
Taking it from there. Yeah. I'll take the last two letters and pretend that's the word or whatever. But the idea is, imagine an alien language, an extraterrestrial language, and just start singing.
I love that. What a great flow through, too. All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for this, and I'm glad you're safe from the storm. Of course you are.
I am safe. I was safe and always will be safe. So be it.
And again, the name of the book is Essays on Creating Reality, book number 7. It's available on iTunes and Audible. One thing that people ask is, do you have to have an Audible subscription to buy Fred's books? No, you don't. I don't have an Audible subscription, and all the books that you buy just come into your login ID when you log on, so you do not need to subscribe monthly. And then I buy a lot of books as well, just on iTunes. Hope that helps, and hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Thomas Miller, along with Fred Dodson. Enjoy the journey.